ministers to brief Nigerians on the successes and milestones achieved under their leadership. This session provides a multimedia platform for open engagement, allowing the public to gain first-hand insight into the policies, programs, and reforms driving the ministry's mandate. As I have previously stated, every minister will have the opportunity to engage with the media during these ministerial press briefing sessions. This initiative is designed by the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation to keep Nigerians informed about the government's activities to ensure that citizens remain active participants in the nation's governance and development. May I extend our heartfelt appreciation to the media for your dedicated coverage, as always, of the ministerial press briefing sessions. Your commitment to informing and enlightening Nigerians about the policies, programs, and achievements of this administration is invaluable. The media remains a vital pillar in our democracy by ensuring that the people remain informed, engaged, and empowered to participate actively in the governance process. Democracy is not an end in itself, but a means to promote freedom, liberty, and the socio-economic development of our nation. It thrives on informed discourse, constructive engagement, and a shared commitment to national progress. Your role in disseminating factual, balanced, and development-focused reports is crucial in consolidating the gains of our democracy and also guaranteeing that all Nigerians understand the transformative strides being made across various sectors. As we continue on this journey of the renewed hope agenda being driven by the visionary leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, I urge the media to uphold the highest standards of accuracy, responsibility, and professionalism. In an era where misinformation and sensationalism can easily distort public perception, your commitment to truth and fairness is more important than ever. We must work together to ensure that the narratives being shaped are in the best interest of our country, devoid of bias or undue sensationalism. The signing of the 54.2 trillion budget by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu only last week, the largest, of course, in Nigeria's history, testifies the administration's commitment to economic growth, national security, infrastructure development, and human capital advancement. This year, 2025, as I have said earlier, is said to be the year of consolidation, a year where all the transformative reforms initiated by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration begin to bear tangible fruits in the lives of Nigerians. Already, we are witnessing the gradual reduction in prices of foodstuff, which is bringing much needed relief to our people. The 2025 budget is not just a financial document. It is a bold statement of intent, a roadmap for economic resilience, social stability, and national progress. The budget has demonstrated a renewed focus on security, infrastructure, education, health, solid minerals, agriculture, and other key areas that have a direct impact on the well-being and the socio-economic development of our country. Let me give the assurances that the federal government remains very committed to the efficient implementation of the 2025 budget in order to maximize its full impact on the lives of our citizens. I therefore call on all Nigerians to support these efforts and to join hands in building a prosperous and united Nigeria. It is now my singular honor to invite to the podium the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduole, to brief the media. After which, as you know, there will be an interactive engagement. She will speak for about 30 minutes, and then there will be an interactive engagement with all of you. Thank you very much, and you are welcome, Honorable Minister.
Good morning, everybody. The Honorable Minister of Information, the Honorable Minister of State of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, the special advisors here present, the permanent secretaries. I especially want to recognize the directors. Permit me to stand with our ministry, the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, who are here in large numbers. Please clap for them. They're actually the ones with their team. And also quite a few heads of agency from the ministry are here as well. Thank you for coming. I can see all of you over there. And you'll definitely hear from them during the Q&A. And so I'd like to thank and appreciate our hosts from the ministry, the directors, and also the agency heads for turning up to be with us here today. Now, the media, it's truly a pleasure to be here to brief you about some of the things we've been able to achieve in the last 100+ days, and in addition to what Mr. President has been doing since May of 2023. Now, we all know that the 8-point agenda, this ministry sits squarely within item 7 of the 8-point agenda of accelerating economic diversification. And we partner and collaborate with a number of other ministries because we're enablers. So we work with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Arts and Creative Economy, Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, a whole host of other ministries as well, health, just to enable and to make sure that investments, industry, trade happens within this economy. Next slide, yeah. So I'm just going to start by telling you a bit about the 8-point agenda, and I've just done that, and then the ministry's role and mandate, and then what we've been up to since the last time the ministry briefed you. So this is the leadership of the ministry and the directors, the agencies. So I'll just stay on the mandate. Next slide, please. Creating and maintaining an enabling environment and regulations for development and expansion of industry, trade, and investment. That's the mandate of this ministry. And what that means is that this ministry facilitates the development of Nigerian businesses, regulatory-wise, policy-wise, for them to be able to thrive. I'd like to say a bit about the ministry this morning. Just under 2,000 people work in the Ministry of Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. About 1,100 are based in Abuja, and we have about 800 around the country. I would mention some of the departments, both whether investment promotion, the trade department, industrial departments, inspectorates, a whole slew of professionals working to deliver this work for the Nigerian people. So that's the mandate and that's the role. I'll just brag a bit and say that this ministry was the first, next slide please, to hold its strategic retreat in 2025. And we committed to 3 things. We recommitted to our mandates, and that what I mean by retreat, the directors and the agencies, about 20 agencies and offices under this ministry is quite a big one. We recommitted to our mandates. We identified 3 strategic priority projects that we will deliver under the CDCU, that's the Central Coordination Delivery Unit, and we identified the budget item that is allocated to that. And what this means is that we're geared up for efficiency and transparency in delivery, because we know where the funding is coming from, we know what it is we're going to do, and we know how it fits into our mandate and Mr. President's 8-point agenda. So we have that clarity. As the Honorable Minister of Information said, 2025 is an inflection point, and Mr. President has made that clear that this is the year to really galvanize all the reforms that have been done since his arrival and take it forward. We also signed an MOU with Agimokwede Foundation on digitization. The Office of the Head of Service has a digitization plan, and the ministry is now keen in to deliver on that plan. So Agimokwede Foundation is partnering with us to digitize our ministry, just like the Office of the Head of Service. You can't even submit a paper document, as many of you know, but Nigerians may not know. So that's where FMITI is going to this year. So now, next slide, please. I'd like to talk about what the 100+ days has been like and how it ties into everything that has been going on. Next slide. I'll start with industry and industry achievements. You'll hear more from this from the Honorable Minister of State, Industry. FMITI inaugurated an Industrial Revolution Work Group. Also, he undertook an industrial tour of the southwest of Nigeria and collaborated with key stakeholders across the four: the Manufacturers Organization of Nigeria and other organized private sector. He also held a town hall meeting. So for the Industrial Revolution Work Group, to accelerate Nigeria's industrial revolution, the high-level town hall with MAN and other organized private sector with key industry stakeholders. Now, the key outcomes of this engagement was the announcement of the establishment of the Industrial Revolution Work Group, an elite task force focused on re-engineering the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan for a modern, innovation-driven economy. Also inaugurated the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria as president and co-chair. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria's president is a co-chair in the IRWG and serves as Nigeria's Industrial War Cabinet. The work group has sub-technical teams dedicated to resolving critical industrial bottlenecks and developing long-term strategies for sectoral growth. So this is the granular work that the ministry teams, the directors, and the nearly 2,000 people I spoke about are working on practically and tangibly. There's also a partnership with UNIDO for industrial acceleration, and through this strategic partnership, UNIDO, under the Program for the Country Partnership, PCP, National Automotive Industry Conference, is strengthening local automotive manufacturing capabilities and access to finance, technology innovation, and research and development. Also, industry policy and governance, the startups for MSME growth acceleration, special economic zones and industrial clusters, value chain development in agriculture, mining, and sustainable energy and environment management. The National Industrial Tour, the Industrial Push Initiative, the first phase of the National Industrial Tour, commenced in Southwest, as I said earlier, and the objectives of this tour: conducting an on-the-ground assessment of Nigeria's industrial landscape, gathering insights to the fine-tuned national industrial policies, providing clarity to industry stakeholders on government-led industrial development strategies. Next slide, please. That's one of the pictures from that inauguration of the Industrial Revolution Work Group. Next slide. So the ministry also released, next slide. Okay, industrial assessment and bilateral agreements. The Honorable Minister of State visited Nigeria-Benin Industrial Corporation. There's a plant there, and then hosted a virtual town hall meeting on industrial transformation, IFC engagement on decarbonization, Maiduguri MSME clinic, and engagement with FCMB. Now, for 2025 outlook, some of you may know that the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Investment in January released an outlook document. So what you have on this slide are the outlook priorities for industry: the Nigeria Automotive Industrial Development Plan, cotton, textile, and garments industry, manufacturing, MSME, census, and the work group that I already mentioned earlier. So that will be the first arm of our ministry, industry. I'll move on now to trade achievements. Next slide, please. So deepening trade relations with 5 key countries, we positioned Nigeria as an AFCFTA digital trade champion and commenced the review of our trade policy. Now, this is kind of a timeline of the major interventions. So from November, the AFCFTA Council of Ministers met, and immediately Nigeria registered its interest in digital trade championship at that time at the 15th meeting of the AFCFTA Council of Ministers in Addis Ababa. And then we also had on the 26th of November a ministerial consultation with exporters. So exporters have peculiar problems, and because this is the priority push of the administration, we decided to have a consultation with them to reassess where they are in terms of regulatory, environment, trade facilitation, exports proceeds, a number of issues, and how to break that into an action plan. And that work has been going on since November, working with the CBN on export proceeds, working with NAFDAC on packaging rules and regulations, working with NAFDAC on the exporters policy, which was becoming a hindrance. So the Honorable Minister of Health and I had a meeting with the heads of agency, and the permanent secretaries are co-chairing a committee to really debuckle that bottleneck for exporters. So tangible, concrete work that has been ongoing since November. We also had the privilege of having a successful WTO trade review in November as well. This happens once every 7 years, and it's an important trade review. You use it as an opportunity to hear what the world feels about your economy. Nigeria had a lot of interest, over 400 questions that were answered judiciously. And so that trade review, you take that information, and we've been using it to adjust our trade reviews for Nigeria. We also, of course, attended Brazil's G20, and there was an India state visit, AFCFTA roundtable in January. We had the privilege of hosting His Excellency the Secretary General. And at that roundtable, we also had Nigerian traders who have leveraged AFCFTA present and talk about their aspirations, how it's been going in actually using AFCFTA trading goods. We also had some of our digital trade champions speak about how they've been expanding across Africa. Companies like Flutterwave, Bamboo, a number of them came to speak for the Nigerian economy. So all that galvanizing, all the work we've been doing with the AFCFTA Secretariat and positioning Nigeria technically, the implementation and the review of our 5-year implementation led to Mr. President getting a commendation at Addis Ababa by the AFCFTA champion. And of course, we were awarded the Digital Trade Championship along with we're happy to lead and work with other countries. It's a very good one. And why that is important is because we looked at the GDP, and services, trade in services is very important for the Nigerian economy because that is where we're competitive. Over 50% of Nigeria's GDP leans towards services, all manner of services. But particularly when you look at technology, that's where our young people are thriving. That's where they have an advantage. Out of 9 unicorns across Africa, 5 of them emanate from here. Our financial services are doing well. Our fintechs are phenomenal. Edutech, agritech, hospitality, transport, name it, in the services sector, Nigeria is doing extremely well. And we're optimizing AFCFTA to create jobs. Another area that I should probably mention now before I move on from this slide is that outsourcing of business services is an area where we've been prioritizing because Nigerian youth can have jobs right from here and earn dollars. And we're talking about productive jobs, not only customer care service. So the first thing is that we're on a good time zone, we're an English-speaking population, and our youth are energized, they're entrepreneurial, so they can self-manage. So you can work remotely, they do work remotely. That program has already started. There's a NATEP under the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. There's another program under the Office of the Vice President, and yet another program under the Ministry of Communication, Innovation, and Digital Technology, Digital Trade. So some of the countries that we've reprioritized and refocused, we were at Davos, we were at Addis, we've had a number of meetings, and just last week we were at the UAE, and we took 14 deals to share to the tune of $5 billion. pipeline deals ready that are already de-risked by a sovereign wealth fund and also by IFC in some cases. And there was a lot of interest from investors out there. So we continue to attract investment in that regard. Next slide, please. So in terms of policy space, one of the areas we've been working on is the special economic zones. We've been working with the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities. In particular, you know that with the tax bill, we had to also intervene after engaging with stakeholders quite a bit, after engaging with the FIRS, the tax committee, the central bank, the operators of the free zones, the enterprises in the free zones, the manufacturers association, to come up with a position to input into the tax bill to make sure that we don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Free zones are a tool for industrialization and for trade, for manufacturing that has worked well in many places across the world. So now we've all aligned in a place and we've made our revised submissions to the National Assembly, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to protect investment and also make sure that the customs territory is well guarded and there's no distortion. So that piece of work was done. And then just in general, I'd like to speak a bit about trade facilitation. Digital public infrastructure, much needed in this climate, like the National Single Window Project has been launched and is ongoing. It's right now in the implementation stage. Mr. President inaugurated it last year, and the committee did a lot of background work, of which in my former role I was a member of the committee. And now we've taken that, the procurement has been done, the partners are Crimson Logic, and they started rolling out that. So finally, Nigeria is going to have a national single window digital infrastructure, and that exponentially increases trade. Ease of doing business is ongoing, regulatory and bureaucratic reforms. I'd like to talk a bit about bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. Some of the background work that we've paid attention to at Mr. President's request, looking at some of our, I already mentioned the WTO, the next ministerial will be happening in Cameroon. So we attended a mini ministerial at Davos, speaking to how to get Africa ready for that next round of negotiation, be it finishing up the fisheries agreement or making sure that digital framework, of which Africa is leading. Africa is the first region to have its digital framework concluded, to make sure that the world recognizes that and other areas in that negotiation. So that's about this time next year in Cameroon. But just to say that also prioritizing some of our bilateral investment and trade instruments and looking at them again and optimizing them, we've been having very productive discussions and earning trust and earning, because what this does at the G2G level is that it enables investment to flow into a region when the investors know that they're going to have certain protections. So the ministry has actually been doing, and some of the agencies, a lot of good work in this area, meeting round the clock, because Mr. President has said that we need to clean all that up and make sure that Nigeria is investment ready, even to the basis of our legal frameworks. Next slide, please. In the interest of time, I'll just pick some, but this will be available publicly. I'd like to talk, like, it hasn't just all been rosy. We had a situation where our sesame was being questioned, and it's a leading export crop for Nigeria. And so we had to move very quickly under the advice. NEPC escalated that challenge very quickly, and we engaged with all the relevant key stakeholders, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, we engaged with the Japanese, we had a technical working group to move very quickly to sort out that problem for our farmers, because that's a key non-oil export. So just to say that in terms of market access, in terms of non-oil exports, this ministry is very vibrant, does a lot of work, does a lot of stakeholder engagement around the country. I mentioned earlier how we partner with other ministries. This is an example of that kind of work. Next slide, please. So I talked a bit about the trade policy review. Some of the issues that exporters had mentioned, I talked about that also. Things like packaging, labeling, that can encourage our exporters to be competitive, because the less they need to spend on packaging and transport and logistics, the more viable their businesses are and the more competitive they are across the region. So we've been working on granular things to unlock those problems for them and encourage them. I also talked a bit about tax reforms and ongoing discussions also regarding export proceeds with the central bank. So just to talk about why it is that digital trade is so important and how the government comes in. So what does it mean to be a digital trade champion? So apart from the fact that it's good optics-wise, it means that we get to work in a granular manner across the continent and for the continent by pushing and supporting and advocating for, in particular, digital public infrastructure. Some of the tools that enable businesses to thrive. So while Nigeria has a lot of fiber optic cable coming and landing on our doorstep, fanning into the country, particularly into low density areas, is not as vibrant as it should be, which limits economic opportunity. So as digital trade champion, we have the voice globally to attract investments to our country and to the continent to make sure that, like the single window, like digital trading tools, portals, all the things that Nigerian youth would need to thrive. Mr. President has said that we should go for it, and he's led the charge himself, spoken about this a number of times, even in Paris, meeting with Google just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'd like to move on just to talk a bit, and I can leave these statistics with you on what we expect to gain from the AFCFTA and why Nigerians need to know about it and take advantage of it, and how the ministry and indeed the government is going to support traders, capacity building, trade facilitation, Nigerian Customs Service. The CGC is even hosting all the customs heads across Africa in Abuja in about a month or two to make sure that regulations are unified and centralized so that goods can flow and as well services can flow, because that is what brings prosperity to African youth. So these are some of the statistics. Next slide, yeah. So just trade revenue growth and why why we chose to focus on exports. Everybody knows that we could do a lot more in non-oil exports, particularly because to diversify our foreign exchange basket. When we explain to people that Nigeria's economy is pretty well diversified, what is not diversified is our foreign exchange earnings. We earn most of our foreign exchange from oil. And so diversifying to push out our non-oil exports, both in goods across the continent and across the world, and looking into that market access, and particularly services which you can export while you're at home because it's basically online, that's already another good area. So all the things that are needed in terms of market access, building trust, building perception, Mr. President has led that charge just by perception management, going across the world and speaking about how we're open for business in trade and as well as investment. So driving trade facilitation in a concrete manner and also in the subtle, more nuanced expressions has been critical to make sure that our businesses can thrive. We're also paying attention to intellectual property trademarks. I know that the lawyers in the room and in the audience will be saying, Honorable Minister, trademarks. The director is here. We've been working hard to reconstruct the structure of our trademarks registry and our intellectual property legislation and regulation. We're working also with Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Arts and Digital Economy on that to have an IP policy that works for our creatives, that works for the entire economy to enable them to thrive. Next slide, please. Let me just mention a few of the investment achievements that we've had. Nigeria bid for Afrexim, the biggest trade fair in Africa. It's enabled by Afrexim Bank, and it's called the International Africa Trade Fair. It's a very, very catalytic game changer for any economy. Nigeria bid for it in November, and we were shortlisted, so we're waiting for the announcement. But what this meant was that we had to host the team that came from a number of institutions to Lagos, using the National Theatre, We had to look at reforms across the airports, across the Blue Line, moving around Lagos State, how it works. We had to visit hotels and to showcase Lagos and Nigeria to the world. I shouldn't let the cat out of the bag, but we're really, really hopeful that we would get this. We put on a very strong show, and it's for 2027, which corresponds with Nigeria's 50th Festac anniversary. And so the first leg of it will be CANEX, which is a cultural fair, in 2026, and then 2027. We don't have it yet, but I want Nigerians to know that we bid for this so that we can have the full support of the country when we get it. I kept telling them we would definitely get it. But I want to appreciate the agencies and the director, the whole team from FMITI that really put in a good showing, and the Lagos State government for the full support. It was a very good outing for Nigeria. I'll also just mention the tracking of Mr. President's investments. Someone asked me once, I think it was France 24, that someone had put out a statistic that Nigerian economy needs about $50 billion to be steady in terms of foreign exchange. And I said, funny, we did the numbers, and as at then, I think November or December, Mr. President's over 30 international trips had generated $50.8 billion in announcements. Now, where the ministry's work comes in is tracking those announcements and making sure that it comes to fruition. So, for example, about 2 weeks ago, the Brazilian trip on the sidelines of G20, when the largest meat exporters in the world, meat producers in the world, announced that they would invest $2.5 billion in Nigeria. They were in the country 2 weeks ago. Oh my gosh, I have a lot to tell you. Anyway, they were in the country 2 weeks ago to actually see what it is that announcements, you now have to handhold. You have to unlock every challenge. And so that's a lot of the work that the ministry does to make sure that if there's an announcement of a factory, if there's an announcement of an investment, if there's an announcement of a trade relationship, that we make it happen. So that's the work that we do. The big wins. I'm almost done. Next slide, please. Just some of the big wins, some of our collaborations, some of our regulatory impact analysis framework. That just helps private sector to know that regulators should have a due diligence, a stakeholder engagement at least before they change a regulation. So that work was also done. Investment opportunities, we've been going out. Next slide, please. We've also been repositioning in terms of strategic communications, which is where the media really comes in reshaping what Nigeria's perception about Nigeria is. We've been speaking to our strength. We've been speaking to the reforms of Mr. President, and we've been assuring private sector in Nigeria, because they're the best advertisement for this economy, and foreign direct investment, that Nigeria is indeed ready for business. Next slide, please. These are just the outlooks in terms of investment. Next slide, please. I was going to tell you about some of the achievements of the agencies, but many of them are here. NEPC, BOI, NEXIM, CAC, NADDC, ITF, Trade Fair Complex. They're doing phenomenally, and I'd like to appreciate them. And yes, so on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, thank you for your attention.
I believe we can make the applause a bit louder. Thank you for that well-articulated presentation. Honorable Minister of Information, you have a remark to make?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that since it's only one ministry we are taking today, we'll increase the questions to 5 or 6 for the Honorable Minister. And the Honorable Minister of State is also here to also make contributions where necessary. But please keep your questions as focused as possible so that we don't beat about the bush. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. So the ball is set for questions and answer. Your name, the media organization you represent, and straight to your question. So can I, by a show of hands, 1, the man on suit, 2, the gentleman in front, 3. So we take these first 3 and we'll come back for another round. So please, the gentleman on suit. Can we get the second mic, please, to the gentleman on suit? All right.
Good morning, honorable ministers and fellow colleagues. My name is Charles Eruka from Arise News. The minister did talk extensively about achievements in the digital economy space, and Nigeria's push in that direction. But when we talk about digital economy, I'm also curious about the place of the digital currency, and in this instance, cryptocurrency. So, when we are pushing in the direction of the digital economy and achievements in it, how then are we thinking about co-opting the digital currency, that's the operation of cryptocurrency in all of this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question 2, the gentleman in front.
Honorable Minister, my name is Abdurrahman Abdurrauf. Well, just two questions, very short ones. The first has to do with digital trading. It is important that when we are talking about digital trading, we should be thinking of what is the cost of servicing these, trading activities, and what's going to be the consequence on the final consumers. Here I'm talking about the hike in data. It's very important we look at this. Now, what's going to be the consequence, particularly on the SMSEs? They are the one going to bear the brunt. Then the final buyers. Is government really doing anything to ensure that they assist, the operators of those trading activities? That is the first leg of the question. The second has to do with tracking of $50 billion, in announcement resulting from Mr. President's trips. Now, how much of this have we been able to put together? Then maybe on the final note, $50 to $80 billion is what we are targeting by 2030. Where are we at the moment in terms of GDP? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your 3-in-1 question. So I will throw it to the gentleman over there.
Thank you. Good morning, ministers and colleagues. My name is Joshua Adams, and I report for Radio Nigeria. My question first is, at the onset of your presentation, you talk about collaboration with other ministries, and I'm particularly interested in the area of facilitating trade within the country. Talking about moving goods from the north to the south and other parts of the country. Across local government, you find these young men, stopping vehicles, and then sometimes it leads to perishing of these goods. What are you doing to ensure that goods can move freely across the country? And then secondly, talking about even entrepreneurs exporting their products. In the area of the ease of doing business, how are you working to ensure, you talked about that, but maybe you should elaborate more on what the ministry is doing to ensure that exporting of goods become a little bit easy for SMEs. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. We'll handle these questions and then we'll come back for more. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles Ekuka from Arise News. So the digital economy space, the digital currency, cryptocurrency, I think that those are firmly questions for the Central Bank of Nigeria, but since it's one government, I'll leave them to handle that. But just the other day, I was asked by someone, I think from Bloomberg, at the State House yesterday actually, about the status of the eco currency across Africa. And just speaking about currencies in particular and how they link to trade, which is my mandate, they're facilitators. When we have easier trade, it's better for everybody. And just to highlight that, Afrexim Bank actually set up a payment system that makes sure that traders can trade in their local currency, so I can pay for something in South Africa with Naira. I can pay for something in Nairobi with Naira. Someone can pay for something with the Rand in Lagos. And what this does is that it stops the need for Africans to pay correspondence banking fees, which was taking a lot of money out of the continent to London, to New York. And I believe that that's the spirit in which the question is being asked about cryptocurrency. So just to say that these are enablers, and we continue to support them because they unlock trade. In terms of digital trading again, Mr. Abdurrahman Abdul Raul, the cost of servicing trading activities and the hike in data prices, I think that Mr. President was really very restrained for a long time. The telcos had been asking, and it's because, like we all know, the cost of their doing business had gone up significantly. And it got to a stage where we were all experiencing dropped calls, and we were all experiencing the downsides of not having sufficient infrastructure to support the system. So the discussion, it was well negotiated. It was the minimum hike possible to make sure that MSMEs can also still adjust. What it speaks to is productivity. When we can produce more and we're more competitive, we then can make more to cover. It's a game of skills. So we are supporting the MSMEs. The ministry has a ton of stakeholder engagements and programs, both in the ministry and the agencies under us, like the Industrial Training Fund, like Bank of Industry, like Nexim for trading. And these interventions strengthen the businesses to be able to withstand the consequences of whatever shocks they have from the economy. In terms of the $50 billion, how much has arrived? We continue to track it. I wouldn't want to release a certain figure that I know that I'll be held to, but we track the investment flows as they come in from the CBN per quarter. We also track what the Bureau of Statistics releases. Our role as Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is to handhold those businesses, to remove the regulatory and bureaucratic bottlenecks, to share information, the transparency and the efficiency of public service delivery, to support them in whatever incentives are possible for them, and to bring that money home. Around the world, this is how it goes. When the investment announcements, that means they're indicating that they've seen something that they like in your economy and they want to come in. But before capital comes in, capital is really a coward. We need to make sure that those comforts are put in place, and that's the work of this ministry, and we continue to strive to do that. Mr. Joshua of Radio Nigeria, collaboration with other ministries, we're basically an enabler, that's what we do. And so trading within Nigeria, it's actually a reform from the PEBEC days, working with the Nigerian Governors Forum, working with the Joint Tax Board. I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of on market days, all the roadblocks that come up. It's the same thing towards the borders. We continue to work with all the agencies that are on ground in these, and it's good for the public to also pay attention and lend a voice so that this ease of doing business can also be facilitated as we support the trading within the country and also exporting of goods. So it's ongoing work, it's rigorous work. We all have to hold ourselves accountable on both sides of the divide, whether government or private sector, to deliver and enable the environment that we can all flourish in and be proud of. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So we take the second round. 1, 2, and I can see a third hand seated there. 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I must applaud you for this very great achievement in this short period. My name is Bob Achanya, architect. I represent the African Center for Asia plus B Studies. I'd like to link your presentation to existential realities now. We look at your presentation and I'd like to ask, within the Global South framework, within the AFTA framework, what is the ministry doing presently to escalate the interrelationships? I said this because, as you know, the Global South appear to be a little bit more sympathetic to development issues, especially across the developing world. We were in China. We also went to Kenya, and we went to Vietnam, all within 1 year. Of course, privileged to lead some federal government missions over there. And unfortunately, what we see is that the kind of trade that should be going on intra-Africa, for instance, between Nigeria and Kenya, you surprisingly do not find it. What are we doing to do that? Especially, maybe I should add, in dairy farming. We go to the Netherlands, our milk comes from there. There's a lot of milk sitting in Kenya. And they begin to wonder, for over how many years there has not been a chamber of commerce between Nigeria and Kenya. A lot is going on in that direction. So what is the ministry doing to excite those sensibilities now and then within the global framework, the Global South framework? I think it's important that you look at those areas so that the work that you did, the foundational work in PEBEC, can also come into there and see how you can loosen the bottleneck that are there. Thank you very much.
Number 2. Good morning, Honorable Minister and distinguished Nigerians. My name is Sonny Daniel. I am an editor with Vanguard newspapers. I know that one of the best ways to attract investments is a conducive atmosphere and reasonable tariff. But with effect from the 1st of this month, the Nigerian Ports Authority increased tariff by 15%. I don't know if you are aware of this, and I don't know if all the sectors in the country continue to increase tariff. I don't know if you believe that this can attract direct foreign investment to Nigeria. I want you to speak to this. Thank you very much. Thank you. And then the third person behind it. Sorry, the man behind him. There's a man there. Thank you. Thank you.
Good day, Minister. Good day, my fellow Nigerians. I must first commend you on your work, and I say you have done a great job so far. I am Malcolm Chedu from Guardian, and I have a very important question I want to ask. You spoke about collaboration and communication with other ministries and ministers. Concerning power, are there currently any communication and collaboration? Because the world and the global West, not South, the West is moving away from dirty energy and going to cleaner energy, greenhouse. You know, we are moving to solar, we are moving to a cleaner source of energy. This is a big investment for Nigeria if we key into that. If we go into that, it's a very, very big business for Nigeria. How are we going about that? Are there any current, I want you to explain that for us. Thank you.
All right, I think the end of that question. All right, Honorable Minister, should we take this last two? All right,
So the gentleman at the end and that lady, yes, will take those, so I will terminate. Yes.
Good morning, honorable ministers. My name is Olawale Ajimotokon. I write for these day newspapers. I have 2 questions. One, I want to go back to AFCTA agreement. You'll be aware that our country, we are about 250 million population, which puts us at the risk of being the dumping ground for goods that come from countries that are signatories to this AFCTA agreement. That has always been the concern, because you know that here cost of production is high, whereas in some other countries it's very cheaper. It's cheaper to produce there. So how do you address this? I'm sure by now you should have your own opinion about this. So that how have you really assessed this, and how has it really helped our economy? The second question, I'm concerned about also that some major countries, you don't have direct flights. Some major countries that can facilitate trade. For instance, Nigeria to Brazil, the population there, and we have cultural links with Brazil. Why is it that we still don't have direct flight to Brazil? And no direct flight also to India from Nigeria, and also Trinidad and Tobago. So those are just my conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And for gender balance, the lady. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, honorable ministers. My name is Oyinye Nwachukwu from Business Day. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'm still staying with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Though some of my questions have been taken, but I wanted to know, because the first shipment export that we did under that AFTA was in July, and it came 5 good years after we signed that agreement. So what do we expect, or when do we expect the next shipment, to come in? That would be my question. Some of the other questions have been taken.
All right, that will be all. Thank you. Honorable Minister, you may wish to respond.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bob, how are we relating with Global South and the AFCFTA network framework, and what are we doing to escalate these relationships? So I didn't really have a lot of time to go into how we've mapped interests. Mr. Bayononuga was asking me here about Trump and about US tariffs, so he just gave, thankfully he was off the mic. So, and I've answered, and these are my last questions, but seriously, it's been a time to reassess relationships, to reassess trade pathways, to reassess what works best for Nigeria, and to build critical relationships. So from Mr. President's footprint, global footprint, you can see where the interest is, you can see where the conversations are going. I myself was in the UAE just last week, as I mentioned earlier, and then with AFCFTA, it's interesting that you mentioned that point, because when we were in Addis about 3 weeks ago, it was said that Ethiopia had a wheat surplus last year. And yet African countries were struggling to import wheat from Europe and being affected by the war in Ukraine. So that session at the AU ended up really talking about how AFCFTA will practicalize the movement of agricultural produce across borders, which is some of the work I was alluding to when I was speaking. It's already started. How we would have the tariff schedules that would allow produce to move freely across the payment systems, the customs procedures, the immigration rules, the value chains, all the things that would need trade to be facilitated. And so we're very mindful of that, and that's why we're prioritizing exports. That's why we're prioritizing AFCFTA and other relationships across the globe, including the Global South and other new friends, while retaining our strategic partners and relationships from time immemorial. So Mr. Sonny Daniel of Vanguard Newspapers, attracting investments, it definitely needs a conducive environment and conducive tariffs. That's why we continue to push and work with the fiscal side and the monetary side of the government to make sure that We are the champions for trade in government. We're the champions for industry. We continue to work with other agencies. As you know, from PEPEC, I was working with over 50 federal agencies on ease of doing business, the people issues, the processes, and transparency. So this is very close to my heart, and we continue to engage and to ask for other pathways and to make sure that as a government we don't have unintended consequences. So it's communication that is key, and we'll continue to do that. So Mr. Chiedu, collaboration and communication again with other MDAs, I just touched on this. For power, where I was just talking with the Honorable Minister of Power just yesterday at FEC, and a lot of the work that he's been doing that is already beginning to bear fruit, even with the painful challenges. I mean, I was saying it the other time when Richard Quest kind of threw that at me, power, and I said, we're working on it, and that's just the truth. We're working on it. And we also have a lot of unconventional pathways. We have renewable energy. We have a lot of IPPs around the country. Anything that private sector can do to deliver more power, to power this economy to deliver. The ministry actually has a green strategy, and I'm so glad you asked about entering the carbon credits market and all that. That's one of our targets for next quarter. So Mr. Olawale, from this day, the AFCFTA agreement and dumping. So this was what Nigeria's main reasoning was and delayed our signing. But while we're thinking about dumping and how it will negatively, there was a time during the negotiations that the other countries had to call us out that if Nigeria is shaking, what should smaller economies say? We're the giants of Africa. Our people are entrepreneurial. They're already trading in Namibia, in Kenya. They're already everywhere. So AFCFTA just helps them to trade even more. We're not afraid of things coming into our economy. We'll make sure through trade facilitation and rules of origin that nothing gets dumped on this economy. But at the same time, we're very bullish about exporting our quality products because our products are in demand and they are good all across the continent and the world. So the cost of production, it keeps coming down when you have economies of scale, so we continue to work on that. And I just watch out for the space. We're also looking into something around direct cargo flights across Africa for our traders because they trade a lot. So if we can bring them together, we can bring the cost down for cargo flights and further facilitate trade. So those are the kinds of things that the ministry works on. I'd just like to end with Ms. Nwachukwu from Business Day, Mrs. AFCFTA first. Definitely 5 years, we didn't start as vibrantly as we could have, but we're picking up and we're being led by our businesses, our traders, and our services. They are going ahead of government. They're already trading across Africa. So ours is to facilitate for them. We signed the agreement. It's 5 years on. We actually announced our 5-year implementation review on the 16th of January when the Secretary General of the WTO Secretariat visited us here in Abuja. And we're re-strategizing on how to optimize. It's one of our main priorities for Mr. President's agenda. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Minister of State will make some interjections at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Minister. By the way, I thought this was a very important initiative, and I think that the ministry needs to be commended, Minister of Information. There are some people that have had to send some messages requiring that the Honorable Minister of State for Industry speaks on certain concerns by manufacturers over matters of power, tariff, fuel customs, and all of that. Let me start by having to make some additional responses to about 2 of the issues that the Minister of Trade and Investment has already commented on. First, it has to do with the matter that somebody asked over dirty energy, and to add that in addition to what the Ministry of Power is currently doing, that just about 2 weeks ago, I initiated some beginning discussions with the IFC, the International Finance Corporation on establishing Nigeria's carbon markets for utilization and storage, which is likely to unlock sustainable financing for industrial growth. I thought that was quite important, and I think that it's a discussion that should be able to also provide an appropriate response to alternative energy and all of that. There is a question about dumping, and I mean, at the beginning of this engagement, the minister had talked about, the beginning of a nationwide industrial push, which has already taken me to one zone in the country. And among the industries visited so far, there is a common trend that I already find, and that has to do with the struggle of our local manufacturers, against unfair competition by those who keep smuggling goods that are produced in climes that the producers themselves benefit from a lot of incentives, unfair competition by goods that are smuggled, most of them substandard. And I mean, that is one of the reasons for the inauguration of the Industrial Revolution Work Group, which is a one-stop group, setting that has in it, officials of the customs, finance, all related and relevant agencies that I think that you don't need to go too far to try to provide some common solutions to the challenges that manufacturers and industrialists are facing. And now, in terms of, the concerns of manufacturers and industry players on a number of these issues, and then what the government has done to try to support manufacturers. Let me just call attention to the fact that early in the life of this administration, Mr. President provided a 200 billion naira intervention that was meant for, 50 billion of that was meant for nano businesses as grants, and then 75 billion for MSMEs, another 75 billion for manufacturers. I think that that provision, that intervention, is still being managed by the Bank of Industry. Let me also say that, one of the things that government and the ministry is currently looking at and pursuing is on how to get our manufacturers to benefit from an appropriate, pricing of gas. I think that this is likely going to be the game changer, that our manufacturers and our industrialists are also able to purchase gas the same way that is done, in mostly, some other sectors of our economy. And I think that when this happens, a lot of the matters about cost are going to be brought down. Finally, of course, we are aware that as at last week, a certain 4% charge that was begun by the customs and all that was withdrawn, was stopped by this government. And I think that these and many more are most of the things that government continues to do to enable a viable, and strategic industrial sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, my brother, Mr. John Ona, and the Honorable Minister, Dr. Jumoke. Let me thank you, members of the media and the general public, for coming here. Let me reiterate that we will continue to bring ministers here to engage with you, to let you know what government or this administration is doing. This is the job of the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation. We don't construct roads here. We don't build hospitals. But we talk and we engage, and that is exactly what we are doing. We will continue to talk, we will continue to engage, we will continue to answer your questions, we will continue to enlighten you about the programs and policies of this administration. Next week, God willing, we're bringing 2 ministers also here to talk to you, and you have the opportunity to engage them, to ask them questions. Now, the goal is that by the time that the administration clocks 2 years, on May 29th, you will have had the opportunity of listening to all the ministers and make your assessment. Every minister will come and engage with Nigerians from this platform on activities and programs of government. Keep a date with us. We'll continue to inform you and we'll continue to engage you. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation, I want to thank once again Dr. Jumoke and my brother here, the Minister of State, for finding time to come. Of course, they are going to leave you with some literature so that you can also continue to ask questions even after we leave this place. Thank you, the special advisor to the president. I'm seeing so many special assistants. Mr. Tunde Rahman has come in here. The permanent secretaries, all of you, thank you very much. Keep a date with us as we engage with you next week. Over to you.
Couldn't have signed out any better. Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, may we please rise as we take the national anthem. Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. No tribe and tongues may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all abroad to serve a sovereign motherland. And with that, we've come to the end of this press conference. Thank you.
Welcome back from the live telecast. We'll now continue with our regular programs. Stay tuned.